With testing season right around the corner, so many teachers are asking the big question: how in the world do you teach kids how to write a TDA? And for those of you that don't know, a TDA is a text-dependent analysis or a constructed response. You could use either one of them, but it is the most challenging thing to teach your students to do. And in this video, I'm going to give you 4 tips that are going to make that so much easier for you. Okay, so let's talk about a TDA real quick. So a TDA, or a text-dependent analysis or constructed response, is basically where students will read some form of a passage, maybe even 2 passages depending on your grade level, and then they have to answer an open-ended question. And typically with this open-ended question, you have to have some form of evidence, whether you are citing evidence or just referencing the text, depending again on that grade level. And then you have to formulate your answer, explain your thinking. It's a whole situation. Basically, here's what I try to tell teachers. A TDA is about the same thing as what a problem is in math. Let me explain this a little bit. So in math, you have your units, right? You have addition, subtraction, you have multiplication, you have division, you have fractions, you have all of these different units. Within those units, you always have word problems, right? And in those word problems, you are taking what you have practiced with whatever skill that you have learned, and now you are applying it into words, and you're trying to pull out the information and you're answering it, all that good stuff. But word problems are embedded throughout every single unit that you're going to experience. TDA is about the same thing, but it's for reading. And so we have to start thinking about TDAs as word problems in math. And so in reading, as we start to go through all of these different units, whether you're talking about genre studies, or if you're looking into characters, or you're looking at problems that are happening, or conflict, or theme, or point of view, any of those, you really want to consider embedding TDA practice within each of those units. Now you're probably sitting here thinking, Bridget, that's great, that's wonderful, but we're so close to testing season at this point that there is no way that I can do that. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you are going to help you right now with teaching your kids how to write a well-structured TDA. But it's also going to really benefit you in the next year as you start to plan out your unit and your curriculum, whatever it is that you're using, and how you can start embedding those TDAs much sooner to give your students ample opportunities for practice, because that's what they need. They need more opportunities to practice. You don't know what type of question they're going to ask. They could ask point of view. They could ask theme. They could ask anything about the characters. They might ask you to compare and contrast the 2 different texts. And so we have to give our students lots of opportunities to be able to practice with TDAs, and that's why it needs to be embedded in our curriculum rather than having it as an isolated unit. Word problems is not an isolated unit in math. It's embedded throughout. And so that's what we really need to think about it. Okay, so you're here because you want some tips, and that's what I'm going to give you right now. The first tip that I'm going to share with you is, 1, know the expectations for your grade level. And you're probably sitting here thinking, okay, well, how do I even figure that out? Well, I'm going to tell you to look to your standards. Your standards are your North Star. They're the things that guide you. And a lot of the times what you start to see in reading is going to mimic what you see in their writing. So if they are just referencing the text to be able to answer a question, in their writing, it's going to be them referencing the text to be able to answer it. They're not going to cite. So 3rd graders are not citing evidence. Now in 5th grade, they do have a citing evidence to be able to answer questions, and that should be embedded into their writing. So if you start to look at your reading and your writing standards, you can see the connections between them. Now, if you're probably thinking, good Lord, that takes so much time, I got you. Right now in the community, I have Anchor Standard videos that have learning targets, mentor text, resources to go along with it. So if you are somebody that just needs a little extra support when it comes to figuring out what in the world you're supposed to be teaching, because let me tell you, those core programs that are in schools are not the right thing. The community is open. You can go and check it out if you want to join us and have all access to all of those resources right at your fingertips. Okay, so moving on, knowing the expectations. I'm going to give you what I have found to be the expectations for each of the grade levels. 3rd grade through 6th grade, that is who I'm focusing on. So every single grade level should start their TDA with some form of a short summary. I'm talking like 2 to 3 sentences. It doesn't have to be anything big, but it helps them have an understanding of, hey, here's what's happening in the text. I'm going to set the story up. I'm setting the stage for my writing in order for me to answer it. A lot of the times when you look at those like acronyms that are out there, like RACE is a really popular one. They don't have you start with a summary. But the research that I've done when it comes to TDAs is that a lot of the times they want you to have that beginning summary piece. Almost think of it as your hook to the writing that you want your students to be able to do. It sets the stage. And what's nice is that if you start to embed this practice into your classrooms, you have an idea of what's going on in the story, so you don't have to remember every single story that's out there. So that is really, really beneficial. When you start getting in the next part of it, so after your summary, you then want to have a section where they're answering the question. So you want to teach them to rephrase and then also answer the question in one sentence. And this is typically going to be your very first paragraph. So the first paragraph is going to include their summary, and then it's going to include rephrasing and answering that question. From there, this is where the grade levels start to change just a little bit. In 3rd grade, I'm going to say it's very, very basic. You give 3 reasons that basically you're referencing the text, you're not citing it, and then you explain it and add a conclusion. 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, it does start to tweak and get more advanced. So this is where you need to give evidence. You need to then infer that evidence, so make an inference regarding that evidence, and then explain how that evidence goes back to the answer that you've given from the very beginning. So those are going to be your big 3. In 5th and 6th grade, you're citing that evidence, which is really important. And then you can even have them embed reasons. So they might have a reason, a citing of the evidence, an inference that they're making about that evidence. And then they're going back and they are explaining how it relates to their answer that they have from the very beginning. Okay, so that's your very first step, is to know the expectations, have a clear understanding of what do you want your kids to be able to do. The second thing that I'm going to have for you is that you want to scaffold the process as much as possible for them. For the love, please don't give them a question and tell them to go out and write it, because that is the most challenging thing, and that's where we start to see kids break down in writing, and that is going to be where all of our behaviors start to erupt. When kids don't feel like they have competency in what they're doing, they're not going to be motivated to do it. We have to support them and scaffold the process. Whew. So scaffold the process for them. I want to share with you something that I have, and it's totally free. There's nothing that you have to pay for. A free resource that can help you with this. Let's look at it together. Okay, so here is the free resource. It's a text-dependent analysis organizer that I have used in my classroom for many years, and it has saved my life. Now, obviously, you want to start this much sooner in the year, but if you're just getting them started, definitely start here first and then scaffold that and release this support as quickly as possible. Hey, Walter. So here is what we have. I give you a little explanation of who I am. I do give you an opportunity to look at how we can support you in the Bridging Literacy community, how we can support you in the Writing Bridge. I tell you to buy my book because why not? It is amazing. And then from there, I give you a little synopsis about this product overall. So I give you a 3rd grade version, which if you look at how it's scaffolded, you have a spot for your summary, and I even give you an area where the kids will circle what they are wanting to share. So they have the summary, they have stating their answer, they give the first reason, and they have sentence starters that they want to start with. We have a this shows that, so they're explaining that, they're giving their second, they're explaining, they're giving their third, they're explaining, and then they're wrapping it up with a conclusion. So for 4th through 6th grade, this is where yours looks a little bit different. Same thing, summary. We're going to state the prompt and then answer it as well. You're going to give evidence from the text. So I have sentence starters for you. You're going to have an inference that they're making, which is here. Then you're going to go into what this means in relation to the prompts. And then you're going to go into the next one. Now, these here, it's important to note that it's not one sentence. Tell your students that it can be 2 to 3 sentences. It might be 4 sentences. It's whatever you need in order to make sure that the reader understands this evidence and how it relates to the text. So here's this resource that keeps going through, and then at the very end, you have your terms and conditions. But here's the big thing to remember is that this is totally free. You can sign up for it right now and get access to it so that you can start using it in your classroom. So along with that second tip, I do want to say that it's so important that as we're scaffolding this for our students, we are guiding them through this process. So here's my recommendation. On the very first day that you read this text, I then recommend that you go through and write a summary and have them answer the question, okay? Just do those 2 things. Check it off, offer feedback to your students where they need it. And the next day, I want you then to have them go out and find that evidence. And so once they have that evidence found, the next day you're going to come back and then you're going to look at how you can explain that evidence. This is the hardest part for students, and this is where they're going to need the most support. So offer that support to them. And so once you have that, you can add the conclusion, wrap it up, have them go through the editing process, whatever it might be that you want your students to be able to do, you can certainly do that there. But make sure you're scaffolding it for them. Okay. The next tip that I have for you is going to be to give them regular practice. Now, what I mean by this is exactly what I stated at the very beginning of the video. It's so important that we're looking at TDAs and constructed responses, not as a way to test prep, because that's not what this is about. It's about getting kids to be able to articulate their thinking, to put it into writing, because this is a skill that they have to have for the rest of their life. It is so important to be able to articulate and communicate your thoughts clearly, and this process helps them be able to do that. And so I'm not trying to test prep my students to death. I'm trying to get them to be able to put it into writing and explain it to me. Multiple choice isn't going to do that for them. Fill in the blank answers is not going to do that for them. Anything where it's just them writing a sentence is not going to help them be critical thinkers. TDAs, in its simplest form, is a reading response. And this is what I try to tell my kids all the time. It's a reading response. All you're doing is responding to reading. They just made it super fancy because that's how education is, and we always try to overcomplicate everything. But it's a reading response, and I want kids to be critical thinkers. And so at the beginning of the year, it might start off a little bit slower. Like obviously, I would typically start this around like October, November-ish. And then from there, I would try to do one maybe like once every month, or then starting to get like once every 2 weeks. Once they really started to have a solid understanding of how to create this constructed response, that's when we would start to make some of those changes. But right now, in this moment, if you're like, I have 2 months or a month and a half, you need to be doing them back to back to back. And I know that it feels exhausting and your kids are going to be so tired of it, but what they need is repetitive practice. They need that practice so that when they go and sit down at that test, they're not freaking out about what they need to be writing. Okay, so offer them regular practice. And next year, I know you're going to do better and you're going to start offering that practice right at the very beginning. Well, hold on, not at the very beginning. Like October, okay? October, November. That's what I'm saying you should start. And then after that, you're going to scaffold that and then you can kind of wean it off as you go along. The very last tip that I have for you is to offer additional supports when and where needed. And so as I would get started, I would definitely use the graphic organizers to help present this to my students. But once they had an understanding of, oh, I write a summary, I answer it, I give evidence, I infer, and then I explain, they know that really, really well by the end of it. And it doesn't take an acronym for them to learn it. All they need is practice. And they need you to have them kind of share that process with them. But once you start to take away the graphic organizer, because they're not going to have that for the state test, then you need to have a way for them to be able to still support them, but not so much to where you have everything laid out for them. And so one of the things that I did is I used think marks. And think marks is something that I created a few years ago. Oh, actually several years ago. And with the think marks, what they do is they really help your students through that thinking process. And so it's a great resource to have so that they can go back and they can reference it. Now, obviously, they're not going to be able to use these in a test, but I tell them keep like 2 or 3 in your pocket, and I want you to be able to reference those over and over again. And so when you sit down to do your test, you can write those down really quick on your scratch paper, and then that way you can come back and you can reference it. So this think mark, we have one that has citing evidence, and it gives some ways for how they can start their sentences for citing evidence. And then we have one where it's explaining evidence, and for the explaining evidence, same thing. They have different ways of starting their sentences when it comes to it. A lot of the times, starting is the hardest part for students. And so if you can offer them that additional support with how they can get started, it's going to be so beneficial for them. So you can create an anchor chart of these. You definitely don't have to purchase them, but they are in my store if you would like to. I have different types that are out there, and you can kind of get a little peek of some that are here. And so all of these I've used throughout the year. And as I would introduce various strategies or skills that I wanted my students to work on, they would put these on a ring that stayed inside of their desk. And so they had it on a nice little ring. They could flip through them as they needed, and they always had their think marks if they wanted to be able to use them. So this is in my store. You don't have to do it. You can put it on an anchor chart, post it inside of your classroom, and have it for your kids to be able to reference. But these are available for you if you need them. If you can take away anything from this video, the thing that I want you to take away the most is that our students need repetitive practice when it comes to this form of writing. And it's so important that we're embedding this into our classroom and teaching our kids that it's not a scary thing. It's not just a testing thing. It's something that's really going to benefit them throughout their education career, but it's also going to benefit them as far as being better communicators, articulating their thinking the best. And that's an important just skill that they have to have when they start to enter the workforce, no matter what career path they are choosing. And so it's a great thing to start practicing now and embedding that into your classrooms. Now, if you're wanting additional support with TDAs, I do want to tell you that right now, the Writing Bridge, which is my entire writing program where I help to support you in understanding what the writing process is, what are the different genres, how do we think about the writing rope, how do we provide the best type of instruction for our students, along with I give you 6 units of lesson plans. And the constructed response, or TDA, however you want to call it, is one of those units that I offer detailed lesson plans along with all of the resources that I've showed you and so much more. So definitely go and check it out. Currently, as the video is being posted, the Writing Bridge is on sale before it has a new price jump. So because we have just finished writing and finishing off all of our units, our prices are going to be going up. So this is the last time that you will be able to get the Writing Bridge at this lowest price ever in its life. So jump on that right now, go and grab it. You get this resource free for life, along with any of the updates that come along with it. And if you don't want to necessarily do the Writing Bridge, you can always explore explore the Bridging Literacy community, which also has tremendous amounts of resources to support you along this process, along with teaching slides, which those are my favorite. I love the teaching slides. I use the teaching slides inside of my classroom. They saved my life. So I will say that those are available within the Bridging Literacy community. Okay, that is all I have for you today. I hope that these 4 tips help you get started when it comes to that. Don't forget to go and grab the free resource for the text-dependent analysis organizer. And then if you have any questions about anything else, put it into the comments. I will be so happy to answer those there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye.